How's it going, guys? It's Jacob Haugh here with
Shayne Williamson
of Jay
and Shays
Sports for Dummies. And welcome to the second installment of a new mini-series we'd like to call the XFL Xtra. Today we'll be giving you our prediction updates with a Week 3 recap, storylines, as well as standing updates to keep you in the know for next week's XFL action. First, let's start it with some prediction updates.
Beautiful.
And we obviously picked the same games last week, so nothing's going to change standing-wise with our prediction updates.
Yeah.
But we picked the Roughnecks, the Renegades, the Battlehawks, and the Defenders. And those games turned out exactly how we expected them, except in D.C. You look at P.J. Walker, and that kid went nuts against the Tampa Bay Vipers. They had 34 points. He had 4 touchdowns, 0 INTs. Looks like the league's early MVP.
Yeah.
He handled the Vipers. That game was pretty clear, cut, and dry. You look at the Dallas Renegades, Seattle Dragons game. What do you think? What are your initial thoughts?
I think, like I said, it's just Dallas. They just keep, I don't know,
They're status quo. They're steady.
They just keep chopping, as my old high school used to say. They just keep chopping. They don't make back-breaking mistakes, and they just go play-by-play, just try to pick up some yards, keep the chains moving, nothing special. We're not trying to go deep or anything. Landry Jones, game manager, he did have 2 picks, but not back-breaking mistakes. So whenever they had the possession of the ball for the most part, they just keep chopping, and here they're in the red zone. How did they get here? And then they're scoring. So it's just a very methodical is the word I was looking for team.
Yeah, they just seem status quo. They seem like they're steady, and they seem like they might keep winning.
Well coached. Bob Stoops is a good coach.
Of course. Next, we look at the joke of a New York Guardians football team. Everyone was very high on them after week 1, but they got handled by the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Again.
By the way, if you're an NFL owner and you want to relocate, St. Louis is looking like the place.
Yeah.
I mean, they sold that place out. Former home of the Rams is where they play. And they had a great performance. They looked steady. The Guardians could never really get down to the end zone, and when they did, it didn't matter. But the Battlehawks pulled out a big win in terms of record because they needed to get above 500, and they did.
Yeah, and the Guardians played 3 different quarterbacks. Marquise Williams went 7 for 15, not good. Matt McGloin went 8 for 11, but he also threw a pick, so also not that great. And then Luis Perez from AAF fame went 4 for 5 with a touchdown.
From the iron.
Yeah, in cleanup duty. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from there. But this was really the first game where we saw the rushing game for St. Louis get going. So
shouts out to Matt Jones.
It was good to see that you can run the football in the XFL.
I mean, Matt Jones was not a scrub in the NFL by any means. He was just on a poor team at the time with the Redskins.
For sure.
And when he got his opportunities, he ran that football. And you saw what happened this past weekend.
Yep, 6 yards per carry.
He introduced what is called ground and pound to the XFL. Going forward, this one is rough. This one showed us that the LA Wildcats did not start the season the way they wanted to, but they're going to end it on their terms.
Yeah.
They're going to start this middle of the season off right. They destroyed the DC Defenders at home, 39-9. Cardell Jones held the 0 points. First loss ever in a professional start or college start. And he had 4 picks.
Yeah. It was rough.
That was a very rough outing for Cardell Jones. He looked out of sorts. The Wildcats, the biggest takeaway for me is that Josh Johnson is steady and his defense is ruthless.
Yeah, they were all over Cardell Jones. He never really looked comfortable at any point looking downfield. 4 picks, that speaks for itself. I think perhaps we counted our eggs a little too quickly before they hatched with DC. However, they were on the road.
They've never not played in Aldi Field until now.
Exactly. So their first road game, take it with a grain of salt. So this next week will be more of a gut check week to see if they are the team we saw in the first 2 weeks or are they the team that has suffered the worst loss in XFL history thus far.
Yep. Next, let's talk about this week's MVPs. We already touched over them. Offense, I'll take the offense, and you take the defense.
Yeah.
I have P.J. Walker, 4 touchdowns, 0 interception performance against the Vipers. He ripped them to pieces. I expect this to keep happening. I can't wait to see him play against the Renegades or the Defenders.
Yeah.
Or, shoot, even the Wildcats again. And I'm excited
Yeah.
for this league because of what Andrew Luck did. And that is bring me P.J. Walker.
And he got a 3-point conversion, which
yes.
excited me to see. For our defense, we went with an entire defense. The LA Wildcats, as we said before, they were just all over the defenders from start to finish. The only points they gave up were in complete garbage time on a Tyree Jackson-led drive when the defenders had already waved the white flag. So, LA, they brought it. They brought it from start to finish. Cardale, uncomfortable in the pocket, looking downfield, clearly didn't like what he saw. Secondary played well. They got their hands on the football 4 times, which is the name of the game. So big performance for a team who hadn't won yet. So a big way to get their first win of the year.
Yep. And moving forward, we're going to look at our thoughts from this week. My early MVP has to be P.J. Walker. He hasn't really made that many mistakes. And another thought is that the Roughnecks look unstoppable. Any thoughts you have from this week so far?
Yeah, same as you. P.J. Walker, I mean, we keep saying his name, but it's warranted. 4 touchdowns. He had a 70-yarder where he was getting dragged down in the pocket, still flung it to his receiver. Perfect throw. Receiver did the rest. I mean, in 3-point conversion, if you haven't seen that throw, go on Twitter and Instagram, go look at that. It was an absolute dime to the only spot where his receiver could catch it. Literally cannot praise this guy enough. He has played amazing thus far, and I can't wait to see in the future for him to get a shot at an NFL job.
Me either. Now, if we look forward onto big games that matter this year, one thing that I can see as huge in the future is the Battlehawks playing the Defenders, as well as the Renegades playing the Roughnecks. And I see all of those games. Both of those games huge to these playoff standings. And we're going to get to the standings last like we usually do. But I think this week 4 coming up lays the groundwork for who is good and who is not for this league. And let's start this off with the first game on ABC, Wildcats versus Guardians. I have the Wildcats getting on them early and often and absolutely rip whatever quarterback they have back there, even if it's Division II god, Luis Perez.
Right.
I think they go in there and destroy the Guardians.
Yeah, the worst thing you could do as a football team is not have an answer at quarterback, and the Guardians still don't have an answer at quarterback. They need to make it, and when you're facing a defense super confident, finally getting their legs under them after a pretty tough first 2 weeks. Excuse me, after a pretty rough first 2 weeks, I think they'll come in here. They'll force 3 turnovers, and they'll get out of there with a huge win.
Up next, we got a very intriguing matchup between the Dragons and the Battlehawks. I think this is the last gasp for the Dragons.
Yeah.
This is your chance. This is gut check time. You need to win this football game. Do they exit this game with a win?
Absolutely not. I think the Battlehawks, they just find new ways to get better ever since their week 1 loss. And of course, we're dealing with a super small sample size here, so bear with us. But in week 2, it was Jordan Teamu airing it out, throwing several passing touchdowns. And then this past week, they dominated on the ground with Matt Jones and Christine Michael. So they've developed into a team where any way you want it, they can give it to you offensively. Defense does just enough, and I think they beat the Dragons.
All right, moving forward, probably the most interesting matchup of the week, and that is the Roughnecks and the Renegades. Like I said just a second ago, this is huge for playoff standings. The top 2 teams from each side, that I believe is called the East and the West, go to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And these 2 teams are battling for a playoff spot in the West. Right now, Roughnecks 1, Renegades 2, and the Wildcats on the rise at 3. So, who do you have winning this game?
I think I like what Dallas does. Again, well coached. I don't think that the offense has enough firepower to keep up with P.J. Walker. I think P.J. Walker puts several touchdowns on the board again, and they do just a little bit more offensively to separate between Dallas in this battle of Texas and take home the dub.
Well, one thing that I'm looking at for a trend for the Roughnecks is they haven't had a game where they haven't scored more than 25 points.
Mm-hmm.
And the Renegades haven't had a game where they've given up more than 20 points, period.
Right. Something's got to give.
Something's got to give. And P.J. Walker's going to take his first loss in the XFL.
Interesting.
And I think this reinstates the Renegades as the best team with this win. But I think the Roughnecks just slip up here because I believe the game is in Dallas, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And that is going to play a huge role if that crowd can get into the game. And I'm taking this pick so our standings next week can be separated.
Ha!
I want to be different from you, at least for one of these.
Right.
Because a lot of this league, our prediction updates are going to be either an upset and both of us lose, or, all right, this is a good team playing a bad team, so here we go. And I personally think this is a great week to do it, so I'm going to try it. Moving on to our next game, the last game on the Sunday slate, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Defenders, Vipers in Tampa Bay. Who you got and why?
Listen, I'm going to go against the grain here. I'm going to pick Tampa Bay to win. DC concerned me with how they played on the road against Los Angeles. Now they go to Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay has a really strong chance of winning if they play Quentin Flowers as their primary quarterback. They keep going back to Taylor Cornelius for whatever reason. Quentin Flowers, every time
he's a better quarterback.
Every time he's in the game, he plays way better than Cornelius. The offense moves. He's a threat through the air and on the ground. I don't get it. I think this is the week where they do get it and Tampa Bay beats DC.
Well, it looks like this is going to be a huge week for prediction updates for our next XFL Extra in 2 weeks. And I'm picking the DC Defenders to go into Tampa Bay and get the job done. They made a mistake. They slipped up. Teams do that. If you don't believe me, look at the NFL. The Packers could not deal with the 49ers in the regular season. That doesn't mean they were a bad team. They just lost.
Right.
Certain teams sometimes just lose. I think everything went right for the Wildcats last week. That doesn't mean they're a bad team. I just think Wildcats were on a rise momentum-wise, and the Defenders thought, all right, we're 2-0. We should be able to handle them.
Right.
I think now they got a chip on their shoulder. Cardell comes back and gets this victory in Tampa Bay. Well, it's time to look at those standings. And if we look at them in the XFL East, you have the Battlehawks on top now. Tiebreakers, I couldn't tell you what they are, but the tiebreaker won't matter because it's there's a bunch more games left. And you have the Guardians at 3, the Tampa Bay Vipers at 4. I don't think the Vipers will move up anytime soon. I mean, I don't know your opinion, but I don't see this one switching. I think the Defenders and Battlehawks are pretty much locks for the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I do think LA will win this week. Tampa Bay will win this week because I think they'll finally figure out that they have a quarterback who can win games. They only lost to Houston by 7 last week, which is a regular one-score game. Really, you could go for the win if you score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion or a 3-point conversion. So I think that's a team that could compete, but in terms of the status quo, I do think DC probably will hang on to that first spot, even if they do end up losing to Tampa Bay here, and it'll be business as usual.
Next, you got the XFL West, and that's the Houston Roughnecks at number 1, the Dallas Renegades at number 2, the LA Wildcats at number 3, and the sinking Seattle Dragons at number 4. I personally think that the Dragons are in quicksand and falling underneath very soon. I think the Wildcats are on the rise, and this entire conference or division, or whatever you want to call it, is in shambles if the LA Wildcats win this week.
Yeah, they have the power to kind of flip the league on its head early on. They came out and they took it to what many people thought was the best team in the league thus far. And then they have another chance against a really bad team this week to prove that they can get back to 500 and prove that they can compete with any team in this league.
All right, well, that's our standing updates, our thoughts, our week's MVPs, our prediction updates, even our predictions for this week. Thank you for tuning into our second installment of the XFL Extra. Once again, I'm Jacob Haugh.
And I'm Shayne Williamson.
And thank you for tuning in for this segment from Jay
and Shays
Sports for Dummies.
Stay blessed.